Hello and welcome. This is it. We've made it to the end of SIMA's winter boot camp. We hope you found the events, downloadable resources, and on-demand videos helpful as you head toward the winter season. I'm the guy that was paused on stage here for a few moments, so ignore my lonesome pause there as we got started. Just wanting to kick things off and make sure you heard everything that needed to be said and all the housekeeping items. But my name's Evan Newman, and I'm with SIMA, Senior Manager of Membership. Happy to serve the members of SIMA and really excited to have you guys joining us for this final event. Before we kick off our final session, let's again say thanks to our sponsors over at Boss Snowplow and hear a little bit about what they're doing with some of their equipment. As I shared earlier this week, if that doesn't get you ready for the winter season, get you a little pumped up, I don't know what will. Again, this week has been a really fun week of content and ways to engage with our members and with some thought leaders in the space. So today we'll be talking about what if technology fails. So, obviously we rely so much on technology these days, and I know that couple. I think it was a couple years ago. I know a couple months ago there was a Verizon outage, and then there was the Facebook outage last year where people thought that the world was coming to an end because they couldn't log on and stay connected. So we'll be kind of entering into that foray today, and by that we're going to be talking about what if our tech fails, because a lot of our new systems, a lot of the things we're doing to become efficient in the snow and ice sector, it relies on tech. And for that conversation, my guest today is Jenny Girard of the Integra Group. Before joining the Integra Group, though, Jenny spent several years in the field and is here to offer tips on how to capture that key data, even if you can't use the technology. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to please drop them into the Q&A or the chat box. And then with no further ado, Jenny, welcome.
Hi, Evan. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. And love the background. Again, that gets us ready for the snow season.
Excited for the snow. Had to bring it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. No better way than maybe a snow dance or a little background to wish it into existence. So anyway, as I was saying, we rely heavily on this technology in the industry nowadays, but for any number of reasons, it might become unavailable. What are some best practices to help your team stay prepared in the event that it does go down or that there is a lapse in coverage?
Yeah, great question. First, I kind of want to dive into why did it go down? You do have those like most recently, I think it was Microsoft, right? And there was
Yeah.
planes that were just could not take off, whole flight systems, Delta, United, right? So that's a major malfunction of technology failing. But most times it's usually due to user error. And it's, probably the most common that I've seen out in the field with crews and just people in general trying to utilize tech. So best practices when it comes to that, because that should be your first, why is it failing and how is it failing and all those questions. So you want to make sure before the season starts, and this is, for some of you listening out there, I'm sure maybe your season's already started. I've seen some pictures of snow out there, but ideally, you want to be preparing your teams and training your teams on tech before you're in the middle of a storm, because there's nothing like you're in the middle of an event, the heat of the moment, and you're trying to teach somebody how to clock into a job or how to find an address and all of the fun things. And, this is something that you'd want to run. And best practice I always use was a mock storm. Mock storms really cover a lot of different things. And we have it a tendency to go right towards the equipment, which is really important. But a lot of the times we forget about our technology, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just as important as a plow sometimes. You can't get through or to your jobs or contact clients and all of the things that are important without that technology. So knowing how to utilize that technology is really important. And mock storms are a great way to do that because you can start pulling on that critical thinking, um, really pose some difficult questions and scenarios. What if this does fail? Bringing in all parts of your team, not just field staff, bring in that admin team, bring in your ops managers and everybody that would be utilizing this from start to finish, and make sure they're ready to go in the event, right? The other one too is providing some kind of expectation or some type of training around the tech, how to prepare for an event. Somebody might not know that they need a fully charged phone before they leave during a snowstorm, or maybe I should bring a charging cord or a charging plug. Giving those expectations are really important, but also delivering the reason why. Why do we use this technology? Why is it important? How does it affect you? Delivering that to the team is really critical, because if they don't understand why or the importance, they're not going to make it a priority. And then finally, that kind of drives me into one portion that I'll kind of dive in a little bit later, but provide the tech, right? You're anticipating somebody to have the things that you need for your business. And it could be as simple as a phone charger.
Yeah, yeah.
Providing that is really crucial. And we don't think about it. But I'm from Buffalo, New York. So I've been through 3 blizzards and operated through all 3 of them. And I will tell you, that was one of the biggest lifelines I had ever thought to do, was throw in backup batteries along
Mm,
with charging cords, because people were stuck and they didn't think that they would need this or that. And I just put it in the trucks for them.
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, we always think about water and gloves and things to keep dry, but we don't think about
yeah.
the battery pack. I'm the first person to admit it. Like I go on a vacation, I'm like, hey, where'd the battery? My wife's like, I didn't make it in. Neither did your headphones. You're setting blind for this 4 hour flight. Okay, great. So,
Oh,
uh, so it's painful at times, but those are important reminders, making sure that we provide the necessary tech and the necessary training and necessary mock events to make sure we know how to use those. So now that people are familiar with the tech and maybe some role playing scenarios to get ready for um, that potential failure, that potential outage, how can you prepare the team for actual failure of tech? So
yeah.
this, we talked a little bit about the outage, but what about the complete failure or downage?
Yeah. So, you should run crisis management anyway for other things with it. I mean, we do it. Most people do it, whether they realize it or not. They're running through crisis management. If this happens, then what? Right. And tech is no different. I've noticed there's a lot of backup plans. If a plow goes down or a salter goes down or so and so calls out of work, we have the plans for that. But tech is usually on that back burner, and it shouldn't be. You should have crisis management for tech, especially if it's embedded in your company. And so the first thing you should do is say, okay, first, what tech are you using, right? And you really have to think about that, because even a phone call is technology. A text message is technology. Um, Sending an email, all of these things, a credit card is technology. So you have to think through all of the different techs you have, and look at like what your operations are utilizing it for, and dive into how it's being utilized. Once you have a full, scope and idea of that, what's driving the technology? Is it a phone? Is it a tablet? Is there internet? Is it service based, cell phone based? You know, Understanding that, because it could start to work around a workaround, right? So if it's, let's say, service based and you're in a major storm and you've lost cell reception, it's actually really common here. We get really heavy lake effect storms and we start to actually lose signal, but our Wi Fi signals are not affected,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or vice versa, you could actually lose Wi-Fi because maybe a line is down. You don't have internet through the lines because of damage, but it could run off of your cell service. So understanding those, like what's driving this technology, is important. And then keep going down that list. What's going to be impacted if this isn't working? Is it your schedule? Is it your routing? Is it your payroll, your job costing, directions to a job, communications, invoicing? You need to know what's going to be impacted to start to understand like what you need documentation wise, reporting and all of those things. So once you've compiled this list, and you got to almost think of this like a downward graph. I have these techs, this is how they operate, this is how it functions through my organization, and then this tree continues. Now that you understand that, you can start to review secondary backup processes that could be utilized if that tech does go down. And reviewing, that, like I said, what's driving it can help understand a workaround. So if it's a Wi-Fi, you've lost internet, you can go to a cell based, and vice versa. Like I'll pick on an example. So let's say you're utilizing cell phones to know routes, maps, confirmation of service. And let's say you have an impactful storm and cell service is disrupted, and you're not able to do the things that you would normally do through communications and texts and all of those things. And so a team member needs to know what to do. And there's a couple of things. It goes back to that preseason, or now, do it now, go through with the team and have them be able to function completely in the blind. So they know the scope of work. They have access to some type of map, some way. You know, again, I'm going to keep driving that mock storm. I am a huge proponent of mock storms or dry runs.
Yeah,
I do kind of
absolutely.
separate those out. A mock storm, you're kind of pulling on that critical scenario thinking, whereas a dry run, you're physically going to the site and you are running through the site saying, okay, here's the things, here's what you need to do. And you're running through maybe a route, and they understand that. Once they understand that, if the cell phone goes down and the route is done, like you can't get to it, at least they know where to start. At least we can continue in some aspect. Um, Another thing too is, have these discussions, during training, like what if our tech goes down? This is what I want you to do for that confirmation of service. If you cannot get that through, here's the next step. I need you to take photos, and I need you to store them on your phone until you can get to reception.
Hmm.
Um, and all of the things that you could kind of train prior to that season. Um, and then also, while you're doing these dry runs and you're doing these mock events, running a SWOT analysis, or I like to do a start, stop, continue. What's working? What's not? What failed?
Yeah, good
And
point.
where are your leak points? What's going on? And those events are going to really help drive understand that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. I appreciate some of those real world practices, and also just, those dry runs are super important to you just know, like you said, hey, here's what could happen, here's what's working well. I love the idea of doing a SWOT analysis so that then you have some idea of, hey, here are our strengths in this scenario. Here's where we can definitely still work even without, maybe again using the cell phone example, without cell service, we can still take photos. We can still make sure that we have, documentation and things of that nature through, this computer in our pocket. Uh, the whole time you've talked, I keep looking over. I have a mesh network in my house. I keep looking, and I'm like, oh, okay, is my light red or green? Okay, it's green. I'm not going down. I keep thinking. So that leads me to this next question. What backup plans, what type of backup plans should you or could you have in place to make sure you're ready in the event of a
Yeah.
damage or an outage?
Yeah. Number one, you need a roster. And whoever is communicating with teams needs that roster in paper form. Because if you were to wake up tomorrow, you have no cell phone, no internet, no computer, how could you get a hold of somebody? Now, could you go and get access to a phone? Probably more than likely you could go get access to a phone somewhere, right? But if you don't have access to the records, you can't contact anybody, right? So I always like to at least keep a running roster of key people. And those key people are like your site leaders, the people that also have the other employees' phone numbers, depending the size of your organization. Are you going to have a running roster of like 200 people? Probably not. But more than likely, if you have all of the key individuals, it's like a tree, right? And they'll have the numbers of the other people and try to keep up. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of turnaround during like, certain parts of the year, and then also certain, levels of service, people turn around. So trying to keep that updated can be difficult. So key personnel have that have that paper roster somewhere. Um, your contacts need to be stored, and I say this for so many people because I hear this, and I when they tell me it's in my phone, I cringe a little bit on the inside because your contacts, they need to be stored in multiple locations, not just your cell phone, right? And not just, also the secondary isn't that roster I just told you. You need to have it in some kind of cloud based, because that way you could access that anywhere, right? Cloud
Yeah.
based allows you to access that anywhere at any time. If it's stored internally on your hard drive on your computer, so this goes for files too, files on your computer or files on your phone, if either are destroyed, those files are destroyed with it, right?
Hmm.
Not always with the computer. Sometimes you can go and take it to IT and they can bring back the files to you. But if it is, you drop that in a, because I know it's happened. I've dropped my phone in a puddle of water I was salting, and it popped out of my pocket, went right in the water,
Yeah.
and it fried my phone. It's gone. I had no, luckily all of my stuff was backed up into a cloud. Um, the other one too, I always, it's not so much document, it is part of documentation, but communicating to people the plan prior to the event, right? And so if you know it's probably going to snow on a Wednesday, you're talking to your team prior to that, saying, hey, I know there's a storm coming, there's an event coming. And these are typically for those larger events. Sometimes you wake up and you don't have an option, right? But
Yeah.
for those, and usually when tech is failing, it's those bigger events anyway. um, Communicate to them, tell them the plan, at least the broad high strokes plan. Hey, this is who you're going to need to connect with, this is your site, this is your route, here's any changes I made. Give that to them in some kind of written method, not just through a phone call. Text message is great, so they can refer to it later. So if something happens, they have something to look back to. um, Teach them if this X happens, why we do Y, right? So if you cannot catalog your material on your phone through our app, I need you to fill out this form. And that just, it's trained, right? And provide that stuff to them. So providing a notebook. I used to have like a graph sheet on a clipboard in my trucks. If something goes wrong, here's the paper trail. Write it down. What did you do? Where were you? What time? What material? And I used to have them do that anyway. It was almost, I know it's kind of like double writing, but when it came to salt usage, I really wanted to know what we were using. And sometimes I didn't want to have the option of failure. So I had a written document, and then I also had them putting it into their phone as well. So designated check-ins, that's, where they know to contact at a specific time, or you're contacting
Smart.
them at a specific time, right? So if you don't hear from somebody, something's wrong,
Sure.
or vice versa. That way it's designated. They know I've been working for 3 hours. I need to make the phone call. I need to check in and let them know. Or also procedural, before you leave the site, or before you're done on your route, before you leave the last property, I need you to contact me prior to leaving. So that check-in point, that it's a stop process. So that way there's some kind of level of communication there.
Sure. That's smart.
I could keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any questions so far, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot with documentation, but the key thing is understanding what you need, how it's functioning, what is it doing for your organization, and what do you need 100% at the end of it, at the end of the event. What do you need to be legally compliant? What do you need to ensure that people are getting paid and that you're getting paid?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that when we were prepping for this, one of the things that was in some shared notes was having your designated people. So let's maybe talk about that for just a quick moment. You know, Eric, you mentioned whether you're on a large team or a small team, having those kind of designated people. But you mentioned first, before we go there, you mentioned making sure people get paid. We saw these devastating storms in the Carolinas just a few months ago, and I've seen a number of posts out there like the cashless society is great in theory, but it doesn't work whenever you can't run your credit card or you can't tap to pay, whatever. So, I think that that's something I just wanted to touch upon. You don't have to go in depth on, but I just
Yeah,
think that it's something that we should key on, or those two kind of final tips that we had talked about in
yeah,
prep.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I always just I'm like, keep going and keep going. Poor Evan hasn't said it,
That's
haven't
a
given a
okay. They
breath.
don't need to hear from me. They need to hear from you. So,
um, well, you did touch on one for the cashless thing, right? These are, I kind of put that in the notes. It's not so much of a technology fail, but it can be, sometimes you set limits on credit cards for field managers, or maybe they're a route person, or in my case I actually we had fuel trucks going around during some of our significant events, and when there's 50 inches of snow in one event, it kind of prevents you from getting that fuel truck around. But the loaders have to keep running,
sure.
and there's no way to get fuel to them. And what am I going to do? Ask my loader operator, who's a seasonal employee, to go to the gas station with the loader and out of his own pocket try to fuel up a Doosan loader?
Yeah.
Well, I learned very quickly, like I've got to figure something out. And so one of them was, I mean, it's out there. I thought of it in the spur of the moment. Do you have Venmo?
Yeah.
And so something as simple, but I hadn't thought about that. I had all of the plans set up. Oh, we have a fuel truck and we'll be able to get all fuel everywhere we need to. I hadn't thought of we won't be able to physically drive to the site. So things like that, and then or something might come up where you need to send money to somebody because they're in a situation, right? So Venmo, set up accounts. Another one was, when people get stranded and you think, oh, I can just set up these things, and if we needed to set up hotel rooms because we had people coming in
Yeah.
from out of
Absolutely.
town to come and help. Well, that's even complicated, right? You're calling into a hotel. You're like, yeah, it's my credit card, but I won't be there. Somebody else is checking in. Well, now that becomes the whole thing, right? And so thinking of these things, I mean, depending on where you are, it might not apply. But the story is like have accounts set up, right? Where if you need to transfer funds to employees or vendors or accounts, have those set up at the beginning of the season, not during the middle of a storm, because it becomes 10 times harder to try to figure that out. Um, Designated like area manager, like I don't want to call it area manager, but like a, a designated person for an area, because it doesn't necessarily need to be a manager. It can be, but it could be, depending on the size of your company, it could just be somebody that's senior,
Right.
that or has experience that knows what is acceptable to leave a site, or it could be their route. They're just the senior on the route and they know what the expectation is, and they can go around and check. Right. And so that's that secondary person. So if you do lose technology, you lose the ability to communicate, you lose the ability to let the team know these things, you have a secondary person being able to run around for you. And it's not just you.
Hmm.
Because when it comes down to one person and you have, this many sites and they're spread across a large area, there's only so much time to get in between, and everybody and their grandma wants to go and check out the storm, and you're stuck going like 5 miles an hour, and you're like, I gotta go, I gotta get across town, and it takes you an hour. What should have in your head should have taken like, oh, this will only take me about 20 minutes. Well, now it's been
Sure.
over an hour, right? So having those people that know what's acceptable for leaving a site, understands, maybe a broader understanding of scope of work, maybe a commercial versus residential, and expectation wise, that hopefully, maybe if you're a large company, is a manager. If not, a smaller company, maybe it's just elevating somebody slightly, to be that designated person to go and double check things.
Yeah, yeah, empowering your people and making sure that
Oh
the
yeah.
people, yeah, make sure the people on your team that know the standard can live up to it,
Hmm.
even when the tech fails. So, any
Yeah.
final words here, Jenny, as we come kind of to the close of this final piece of the boot camp? Any final parting thoughts that have come to you while we've been talking, or while you've been going through some of these lists of things for people to keep in mind?
Yeah. As somebody that works for a tech company, I know, and somebody that's utilized tech, I'm a millennial, so I didn't necessarily grow up with it. I grew up with, the turn dial TV. I was just talking about this the other day. I was joking about it, right? I know what a rotary phone is, but I grew up with tech. And so I understand the importance of it. And I also understand the impact it can have when you lose it. But the problem is we've gotten so comfortable with tech. Don't take it for granted, right? And so you need to have crisis management for tech. It is, it can be devastating to a company. And, a lot of things can happen when you lose that tech. So be
Hmm. Hmm.
prepared. Better to prepare than not, be a fish out of water.
It's a very powerful reminder. Makes me reflect on a story. A friend of mine was telling me he owns a small manufacturing company in the city I live in, and his server had gotten hacked recently, and so that's something we won't even bridge today, but still, it's
No.
like there are just so many things out there, and when we completely rely on tech, we're at risk. So having that kind of that fail safe, if you will, back to your point. So
Yeah,
Jenny, thanks again for joining us for
absolutely.
today's portion of the boot camp and bringing us home as our cleanup hitter, if you will. So Heather's going to show the a QR code if you haven't scanned it yet, as well as just this website here, the simon.org/bootcamp live. If you have been playing along with us all week, you have the opportunity to win some prizes from SIMA, from our sponsors, and some different folks who have given. So you'll have one last chance to enter when you complete the survey that will be sent out later today. But you also have this opportunity by scanning this QR code and hitting 111. What if that's your event code for today? So it'll ask for that. So again, you'll get a survey later today to give us feedback on how we can improve the boot camp moving forward. But you can scan this code now if you would like. Again, a reminder, if you've missed something this week, if you registered late, if you just want to revisit some of the topics, please visit simon.org/bootcamp live, where you'll find recordings of all week's live sessions, on-demand videos, a ton of downloadable resources and documents. And just thanks again to our sponsors at Boss Snowplow for being a part and driving the boot camp forward with us. So we hope you have a safe winter. And remember, Simon's here to help in any way we can if you need us. So thanks again. And thank you for being a part of the boot camp this week, everyone.